Good afternoon. This is Susan Heaton Wright. And even before we start, I'm told it's 12:30. So welcome, Joanne. Thank you so much for stepping in at the last minute. To be honest, we have an absolute superstar who's going to be talking about microaggressions, the impact, what we can do as human beings to be better people. And she is the founder and CEO of See Happen Change. She is an inclusion and belonging specialist. I love that, belonging specialist. So welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate the last minute shout out, and I'm more than pleased to be able to be here and join you all today. So thank you so much. Oh, by the way, it's See Change Happened. It's just it's no worries at all. But yeah,
See Change Happen.
Yeah, that's the one. But don't worry, it's fine. If you Google me, you'll find me. It's okay.
Okay. And we'll make sure that there are links, because I'm sure that many of you will be wanting to link with us, link with Joanne afterwards, because what she has to say is very powerful and is life-changing for people who are leading teams, who are managing teams, and for colleagues. I believe, and I know Joanne believes, that the majority of us are wanting to be good human beings. And it might be that we say something that we're not aware could be construed as upsetting for somebody else and could exclude them. But we're going to talk about this now. The name of this particular discussion is about microaggressions. And I know you've got some ideas about microaggressions because we bandied this word around.
Yes, we do. And I've actually been at conferences and where the speaker before me says, I'm not going to be talking about any of this new wave woke stuff like microaggressions and all these other words. And I thought, unfortunately, that diminishes the impact that it has on people. And for those who don't know, a microaggression is a subtle, mostly unintentional communication of some sort of form of bias or discrimination towards a historically marginalized group. So generally, someone who comes from a privileged group communicating in such a way to someone from a marginalized group in an unconscious way, communicating something that is hurtful. And the reason it's microaggression is because it's so tiny, if you like, that you almost think, well, what's the big deal? But if you think about it as like being sort of death by 1,000 cuts, a little paper cut, it may not seem like a big wound, it may not seem like something major, but if you're constantly being cut by paper on your fingertips all the time, it's going to start to really sting and hurt. And when you've got your finger full of cuts, you're going to start not being able to function correctly. You can't do things. You're going to be more worried about these little cuts and little pinpricks in you than you are about getting on with your job. So the microaggressions build up, they're cumulative. What seems small can become a mounting problem, impact mental health and impact the way you want to thrive. And of course, makes you feel uncomfortable in that environment. All these people are constantly using this negative language around you. Of course, your psychological safety is going to drop. You're going to feel a lack of trust. The people around you are going to be seen like threats to each other. And of course, then you're going to switch off. You're going to disengage. You won't want to be involved because you know if you're going into that space, you're going to be feeling uncomfortable because you're expecting the microaggressions. And I think the sad thing is microaggressions are actually part of our the way we talk to each other. We kind of grown up with banter and humor and old-fashioned language. And most people, as I say, the intent is genuinely good. And I remember, I don't know if you saw it, there was something on television the other week around Richard Madeley was interviewing one of the lionesses, and he called her love live on television. And you may think, well, love, how could that be a microaggression? But that's reinforcing power and privilege, patriarchal messaging. It's saying, there you go, back in your box, little woman, little girl, love, pat on the head. So words that are meant to like that, I'm sure he meant nothing by it in terms of being patronizing, but the impact we've got to think about is often it's not about the intent, often it's about the impact it has on people. So those subtle little words, and the media picked up on it, other women have picked up on it. people are addressing this down, saying, hang on a minute, you can't go on national television and start addressing women as love. It's just disrespectful. It's really, really, and that's when we talk about microaggressions. That subtle how you see people, how you treat people, how you talk about people, impacts the way they function in society.
You know, it's really interesting because people will often say, oh, well, it was different in the 70s. It was different in the 80s, but it still hurt then. I've been watching the Commonwealth Games and it was at Alexander Stadium. What you don't know is that I used to be a county sprinter as a schoolgirl. And I remember lining up on that track in the 100 meters relay, and the person commentating and say, oh, doesn't that team look pretty?
A microaggression. It is.
Yeah.
That's it. Those well-meaning comments, that impact it has on how you're perceived, how you perceive yourself, it's putting you back in a box, saying you must look pretty as a woman to be able to be taken seriously. Yeah.
Now we've got a few people that have said hello. With Stephen O'Donnell, Bernie Davis, Donna. Oh, and Bernie has asked, some of the greatest offenders, so to speak, are words entrenched in our vocabulary: blacklist, blackball, Black Sunday, etc. What are your thoughts? And thank you, Bernie.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, this is where the anti-woke brigade kick in and go, oh, come on. We call it blacklist. We've used master and slave in electronics for years and radio communications. We've used all these words. And yes, we have. But understanding that the etymology, or is it etymology, is that insects, whichever one is about the history of words, where they come from. Understanding where they come from is important. And I'm going to use a word now which people might find offensive, is the word Eskimo. And we use that for years and years and years, meaning people from the Canadian tundra, that sort of that region. And the etymology of that word is really, really offensive. So they prefer Inuit, and that's the term they would describe themselves by. So when we're using these words, if we understand where they've come from and the historical significance of why people find it offensive, then we can start to move on and evolve our language. Because I know most people use it out of habit, use it out of familiarity.
Yeah.
And I know that Sky News and Sky Sport, for example, now have a list of words they won't use because whether they're offensive or not offensive it's not out for debate. We know that some people find them problematic. If you know that someone finds it problematic, you have a choice to use a different word and not cause offense. Whereas if you just say, oh, come on, it's just too difficult to change that word, you know that some people are going to be offended by it. And if you're not bothered about offending people, that's fine. But I'd like to think we all wake up in the morning trying not to be a dick, if you want to put it a better way. We all want to wake up in the morning and be a good person. So if you know that something is problematic, then why wouldn't you want to evolve? And I'm not in the game of telling you what to think or telling you what to say. All I want you to do is just be aware of those words, of those phrases, where they've come from, and how they could potentially cause someone else to feel less than themselves because of that word. Then you have a choice to adapt or not adapt as you see fit, and then it's your choice.
But what happens if you've got a team member or you've got a colleague that you might be a bit frightened of already because they might be doing that with you, or a manager? What do you do to try and stop that if they are saying an offensive word?
Well, let's use some recent employment tribunal cases as an example here. We had the Alison Bailey case versus Stonewall and Garden Chamber.
Yes.
Their barrister practice, and we also had Maya Forstater in her case against the council. Both of these people felt they're being discriminated against because their gender critical beliefs were told that they were unacceptable in the workplace, and the tribunal found in favour in their appeals in some part of that instance. And what I think the judge in both cases said, yes, you're allowed to have a belief, you're allowed to have a view that is protected under law, but at what point does that belief become antisocial? It becomes divisive, it becomes obnoxious, it becomes discriminatory. So I think in both cases the tribunal said that employers need to put guidance out in their
Yes.
environment to say what is acceptable language. This is our values. This is what we stand for. And I think both those tribunal cases were partly won on appeal because each of those employers didn't have a clear guidance on what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. We also had the example where I think there was a person working for an estate agent or a property consultant in the Manchester area who tweeted racist remarks after the Euro finals with the three black men missed those goals. He was dismissed because he held those racist views and he made them public on Twitter. So it's important that employers lay down what is acceptable language. And I think I've seen some great examples of this with companies where they have our view on is. So our view on racism is, our view on transphobia is, our view on this is. And then you lay down very clearly about what you stand for as an organization. And then you say to your people, if you don't share these views and beliefs, this may not be the best place for you because this is what we find acceptable. Because the last thing I want to do is be working desk next to somebody who I know has far right extremist views, racist views, sexist views. How am I going to feel safe? You know, we talked about microaggression right at the beginning. Just sitting next to somebody who I know has these views about me. They may not be expressing them, but I know they have these views about me. How am I going to feel safe? I'm not going to feel safe being alone with them. I'm not going to feel safe interacting with them because I know that they're basically looking at me, seeing me as a lesser human being than them. So I think in order to create this psychological safety, ensure that we're allowing people to come into work and feel safe, we need to say what is acceptable, what is unacceptable language, without stifling it. Yeah, without stifling it.
Framework. And that's really interesting because then if you feel that there is somebody in your team that is being microaggressive and you've already got that framework of beliefs and values of the company, it's easier for you to challenge that. Likewise, if you're a manager or a leader, we're getting loads and loads of comments. It's just brilliant. So Deborah Henley, hi, said, wow. Loretta said, hi there, very interesting topic and not without a controversy. And a couple of people have shared etymology. Apparently that's
Etymology.
the word. Thank you. Thank you.
Not the insects, etymology. Thank you.
Bernie said, thanks, Susan and Joanne, for your thoughts on this. So true, language has to evolve. Absolutely. Barak Malik says, wow. Stephen says, it appears that whilst Forstater, I think that might be a typo, apologies.
Forstater was the lady's name, yeah.
Okay. Held a reasonable belief. She was quite rude about expressing it. Okay. And Bernie Davis, recently at the Wales Online Diversity and Inclusion Awards, the presenters were so awesome and apologized for telling us all to let our hair down and enjoy a drink. Ooh, how honorable of them. I had no idea this would be offensive, but they responded favorably to the comment they received about it. There is progress being made. And before I read some of the others, I should say I was at the Commonwealth Games, and every single time the lovely volunteers said, moved us on, they said, hi guys, welcome guys, go this way guys. That was not inclusive.
I find guys as being a familiar term that people think is gender neutral, but I argue who decided it was gender neutral? It's like,
what's wrong with everyone?
Yeah, well, if you just got to ask a man or a woman or a non-binary person in the street, how many guys have you slept with? And they're certainly not thinking about women at that point. You know, a man doesn't think he slept with guys. I haven't slept with any guys. So at what point does it become gender neutral?
Yeah,
it's like,
I've got a question from Z Razak. He's from Certex Accounting Harpenden. He can't be on the call, but he said, and we've probably answered these, how do you bring it up with a team member who is acting in a microaggressive way, and what's a good solution to help them with it?
I would use the technique called calling it in rather than calling it out. So calling it out is very much a sort of stop, no, bad language, and that sort of creating a barrier. So for me, it's about the education, which is why my mantra is smile, engage, and educate. So it's around how do we have that conversation? How do we sit down? And I would always want to talk about intent, impact, and accountability. It wasn't your intent to upset. It wasn't your intent to make that person feel bad. But the impact was that your language, your word, your phrase, whatever you used, had that negative intent, had that negative impact. So accountability is owning it, learning about it. I'm sorry, I apologize. Of course, if the person goes, well, I don't get that at all, I really don't see that. Well, at some point, coaching, is some work there, and it's important because we've got to be careful that one person doesn't destroy the team culture.
Yes.
And if you have someone who's bringing negative and toxicity into an environment, they can destroy the culture of the team, culture of the organization. So it's about working out, again, going back to what are your views as an organization. You have to decide what is acceptable, what you stand for, what your beliefs are as an organization, as a culture within your organization. And then it's about working with people to help them understand why those views are intolerant in the culture. And I think if you do some research, look at the paradox of tolerance. The more you accept extremist views, because you have to give everybody a voice, the more those extremist views become the view, and that seems, that's where you get extremists, and that's where you start to. And it's good to have balanced opinions. It's good to make sure we don't close our minds and have groupthink and all these kind of things. But if we allow extremist views to take hold, that's where this paradox of tolerance sits in. So we almost have to be the oxymoron is we have to be intolerant of intolerance. And so we've got to make sure here we understand what intolerance is and what is acceptable. And we know what's acceptable in our society. We also have to decide what's acceptable within our culture, within our organization as well.
Oh, brilliant. Now, going through some of these, Barak said, wow. Bernie, again, wonderful, Bernie. You're commenting so right, Joanne. We have a responsibility. Allyship at work is key. Absolutely. Deborah says, I found myself saying, guys, I'm guilty. Unless the man is gay, of course.
I say guys as well. And I'm not, as I say, I'm not the language police. I'm not the language police. It's so ingrained into our kind of language, but it's understanding the etymology, the word history on that, of these words and how they're formed, and then we can choose to adapt around it. And as I say, I'm not saying that you can't use these words. It's just understand when you're using them how they can potentially cause offence.
Yes. So Deborah says, calling it in, love it. Bernie says, love calling it in. Yes, not responding with aggression. Loretta says, I understand the value of employers setting guidelines on organizations' values, but is it possible to manage individual ways of expressing oneself? Eskimo has different connotations in different cultures, for example. By trying to censor ways of expression, we are denying ourselves any chance of peaceful multicultural society. What's your view on that?
Yeah, as I've been saying, I'm not here to police your language. I'm just saying that if you understand a word is problematic for a section of society, if you continue to use that word, you're doing it knowing that you're causing it to be problematic to your audience. If you don't want to cause potential offence, then by modifying the language you use means you're likely to resonate and be more appealing to a wider audience. But I appreciate that can be work. That is work that some people have to do. And I appreciate you may not want to do that work. You may go, well, I'm actually happy being me. I'm happy using the language I'm using. And that's absolutely fine. All I ask you to do is just be aware that by not being aware that you are inadvertently upsetting people and causing microaggressions. And that's your choice. I'm not here to say don't do it. I'm just asking you to understand the intent and the impact side. The impact of your best intent is negative. And it's just understanding that. And I'm not trying to put this woke gender, make this a woke agenda that you can't talk, you can't say anything anymore, you can't tell jokes, you can't have banter. I'm not saying that. We want the world to be fun. I have fun. I have fun whilst understanding the impact I can have on people. And I don't get it right all the time. I use guys. I misgender people. I misgender myself. Yeah, without thinking sometimes. So it's just being consciously aware. You know, we often talk about emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence within leadership. We look at the 6 C's of an inclusive leader. Cognizance of bias. We look at cultural intelligence right in there. Being brave, having humility, all of these great things. If we talk about leadership here, it's understanding that you have to be adaptable as a leader to ensure that you're motivating, inspiring, and communicating with the team effectively. If you're not being very person-centric, you're not thinking about individuals, then you're potentially excluding people, and then you're making people feel intolerated or excluded, or whatever it may be. So all I'm saying is, if you're coming from a leadership perspective, how do you want to be perceived as a leader? How do you want to grow your team? What is the culture of the team you want to establish? And again, your choice of how you do that. But I would say that the 2022 employee is far more cognizant of what they expect from an organization in terms of how they're treated. And I think we're whilst we're going through a potential recession, we're seeing jobs being cut. It is still a candidate market. It is still an employee market. Organizations, whilst they're laying off, they are still struggling to attract and retain the best talent. So anything you can do to have competitive advantage in attracting and retaining talent means how you treat people has got to be in there as well.
Brilliant. Really, really good answer. Deborah's having to leave. She did say the gay comment was in response to Joe's comment that you wouldn't say to a man, how many guys have you slept with? She wanted to clarify that before she left. And Loretta says, what's the difference between managing microaggression and censorship? Really good question. Wouldn't it be more productive to focus on resilience to what a person may perceive as microaggression, bias, etc.?
Is that akin to asking the victim of assault to be more resilient and not complain when they've been slapped? We often say, sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But actually, we're learning now that words can hurt more than physical violence. And we would never say to a victim of physical violence that they should have more resilience and just roll with it. So I don't think we should be saying the same to people who are experiencing microaggressions or being damaged through that kind of environment, saying you have to girl up or man up or non-binary up as a result of that, or person up.
Yeah. Okay, so I've had a message from Trisha Lucas Clark, and she has agreed that I can read this. She says, I feel microaggressions can be more hurtful and upsetting than very direct comments, as they can be snide and undermining, which we agree. When I was younger, and due to my upbringing, I put up with microaggressions as they were not recognized as being inappropriate or hurtful. I now feel more comfortable dealing with the situation and have made a pledge to challenge if they're made towards me or others. I'm happy to say I don't hear them often at GSK work, which is where she works, which may be because colleagues are more aware and know they are inappropriate. And also, as I've grown older and more senior, I don't appear as vulnerable as I was. Microaggressions can make people feel isolated and vulnerable, as the perpetrator may make a comment in a group setting, and if others don't register it or choose to ignore it, the person it's aimed at may not want to draw attention to themselves. My response to a microaggression is to say, what do you mean by that? This puts the comment directly back to the person who made it without being confrontational, but calls for an explanation. I would also check with the person it was made to afterwards to check they're okay. Examples are comments from someone with afro hair looking like they had an electric shock. That's what she received. About 25 years ago, for acknowledging racism in senior managers, saying That's what they are like. Just ignore him, when she made a comment, when she complained. At the time, I was vulnerable and didn't feel up to speak up or complain, but did feel very upset about being called an astrakhan fairy, reference to hair type, and being called a dark horse with full intent of it being a racial slur. All hard to prove, but uncomfortable to hear. Also, the dirt wouldn't show on you. Her question is, why do people not speak up to support colleagues when they hear a microaggression? As you can see from above, allies are needed. And then she asked me.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. That's very powerful. And one of the reasons I think organizations should look at programs such as allies training, and this is not around any particular characteristic, race, faith, ethnicity, gender identity, whatever it may be. It's around recognizing that allyship goes across the board. It's about being a supportive person to a group who are often marginalized. And I think allyship training is really, really important. Teaching people techniques of how to spot a discrimination, how to spot microaggressions, how to call it in, how to educate, be confident, how to maybe use visual stop or pardon, very forceful, strong voice, visible, and say enough or stop. These sort of techniques, and many people aren't confident to speak up because often microaggressions come in with power and privilege. The person who's maybe committing these microaggressions has a level of influence or power over you. Because a microaggression committed by somebody who has no power or influence over you probably bounces off. It's only when that microaggression is delivered with some sort of power over you that it has the impact. So I think it's important to recognize that not everyone feels capable of challenging because they're worried about their job or nobody else is. We got that bystander effect. No one else has said anything, so why should I say anything? So it's trying to challenge bystander effect, look at allyship, avoid groupthink. Everyone else is okay. I'm okay with this, and the person left isolated. I mean, we see it all the time where women are talked over in meetings, ideas are taken. People who are black or brown are often treated as less intelligent in organizations, but not getting promotion. We talked about using the word love earlier. How those little micro petty things are creeping in, how women are given menial tasks in meetings to do, organizing Christmas party, all those kind of things build up, and they're not. You go, well, those aren't microaggressions. Well, actually, yes, they are. They're these little things that put people back into a box and impact the way they're perceived and how they perceive themselves, limit their career choices, limit their opportunities. And so it's just being aware that these things, and unless we have these conversations, people just go, oh, really? Well, I never thought of that. Blimey. Whereas if you experience it day in, day out, you're hyper aware of these things.
Yes. Now, I am very, very aware, and I know that there are still some questions coming in. I'm very aware that you have to leave at 1 o'clock, otherwise I'm toast.
10 past.
Oh, okay. All right. Because I know there are still questions coming in. And Loretta says, not exactly, just thinking that by focusing on victimization, we will build a society where 80% of the population vulnerable, who will protect them then? This is an interesting discussion.
Yeah. It's at what point do we say enough is enough? And I'm not saying, there's a saying, isn't it? Nobody can make you feel something. You choose how you feel about something. But it's that repetitive nature, and microaggressions is the repetitive nature of being pushed down, put back in your lane, put back in your box through words, through actions, through colloquialisms, through well-meaning intent. And I'm not trying to say that people are being made a victim because of it, but the impact of it is it destroys self-esteem, and it destroys how people are perceived by people around them, because these words and phrases stick. Labels stick, language sticks, internalization, and how people perceive you. So I'm not saying that I'm a victim when I receive microaggressions, but I certainly feel that impact. In the same way that someone slapped me around the face, the words that people use to me make me feel just as shocked, just as aggrieved. It's like, wow, why did you do that? Why did you say that? And sometimes I'm stunned for hours going, really? Really? Did that happen? Am I imagining it? No, I can't. Oh, no, I must be misremembering it.
Yes.
Because at that time, you're so blown back by by that interaction. You just go, and hours later, you can't stop thinking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks. In fact, I can still remember microaggressions going back years,
Oh, me
because they
too.
stick.
Yes,
They stick into you.
they do stick. You remember how
And
you
I'm
feel.
not a victim. I'm not seeing myself as a victim. I'm
No,
just seeing. So, and I don't think we are taking this as a victim. But I was using the victim analogy to say, we shouldn't put the responsibility onto the victim, to the person who's received these, to do all of the education, to do all of the fighting back, and to have to prove that belief all the time. If you look at, I hate using the law, but the Equality Act 2010, discrimination, victimization are as perceived by the receiver. If I feel I've been discriminated against, if I feel I've been bullied, if I feel I've been harassed, it's how I feel, regardless of what your intent was. So I think we need to be careful here that we don't victim blame, if you like,
yes,
or tell the victim that, oh, come on, it's not that bad, really, because that's often privilege speaking back, and that's the danger here. We
it is
minimize.
part of our society, isn't it? That the onus is on the victim. Oh, well, she was wearing a short skirt. She was drunk. Yeah,
She was asking for it. Yeah.
she was
She was
asking
at
for it.
bar asking for it, and that's why she got what she got.
Yeah,
Really? We believe that, do we?
yeah. We've moved on from that. We know that know that is not a good way for society to act, in my opinion. So Bernie says, yes, Joanne, it's like white noise, these experiences. Yeah, I still get, and sometimes we can get triggered because we've had something awful said to us in the past. We're almost anticipating that's going to happen again, or something that someone says when in fact it's quite innocent. You're triggered back to that previous time.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I interact with a number of people. Yeah, I'm transgender, and I often get misgendered, but I actually get well-meaning interactions that actually impact me as much. Where I was at supermarket checkout, and the person who was scanning my beans and my cornflakes as they were going by looked up at me and said, "Oh, did you see that program on television last night about transgender people?" And I thought, well, thank you. Really nice of you to start a conversation with me. But could we talk about EastEnders? Could we talk about something else? I don't really want to talk about a transgender program. Do you ask everybody? Is it just me? So sometimes latching on to a particular characteristic like that, it makes me go, here we go again. I'm exhausted. I took enough about being me in my day job in other society. Can I just buy my beans and my cornflakes and get out of it? So
Yeah.
it's well-meaning, and I smiled. I talked to this lovely person about this, but afterwards I just came away exhausted by going, I've now been redefined by who I am yet again, and that conversation was
Yeah.
about that part of my life, which I'm not ashamed of, but I'm just getting exhausted talking about it. And I've been earholed by people who want to talk to me about trans people in sport, and I go, do I have to be the representative in this field talking about trans people in sport? It's exhausting. Please, can we talk about something else? I'd like to talk about other major issues of the day. The entire Conservative Party focused on trans rights at the moment. It seems to be who could be the most transphobic. I wake up every morning and see this. It's like, it's exhausting. Just to have to deal with this wind in your face every moment you're looking at the window. And that's just, and I'm not saying I'm special. I'm not saying that I deserve to have extra special treatment or kid gloves or anything. But if you've never felt this torrent of pressure on you all the time, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And I know that there are many people in society, marginalized backgrounds, people who've been marginalized, feel this a lot. And people who are, there's a thing on television last night about the lack of NHS dentists, and the people there experiencing a lack of dental care we're going off topic on microaggressions, but it's the impact that people are having where they don't have the wealth or the affordability to go private, and now being left and marginalized further by society. And now they have poor teeth. That leads them to feeling less willing to engage with society, more of a burden. They're not able to get employment. Their mental health is suffering. So we look at all these things, and whilst you may go, well, that's not microaggression, but the impact is still the same.
Yes.
You're causing people to be marginalized and pushed to the edges and lack support because they don't have the privilege or the wealth or the contacts to make it happen.
So Bernie says, gosh, it's the ones who start off telling you immediately how many black friends they have and that they do not see color. Really, I think you wouldn't be saying this to a white person you just met. So you missed I'm black? Thanks, Bernie.
We want to see people's color. We want to see people's gender. We want to see people's identity and understand what their superpowers, what makes them special, what makes them happy, what makes them laugh. If I erase your culture, your identity, I'm just boiling you down to me. I'm making you like me, and I don't want people to be me. I want people to show their richness and their color and their sparkle, if you like.
Absolutely. Now, I am very aware that Joanne really will be cross if we go on much longer. But if there are any other questions, please ask Joanne. You've all got her contact details. I'm sure she won't mind you linking with her on LinkedIn, or to leave a message at the end of this live stream. This has been absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure there are people that will say, can we do this again? Perhaps when less people are on holiday, because this is the way forward. I'm so privileged to have had you on this live stream, Joanne. Thank you so much.
I thoroughly enjoyed being here. It's been absolutely amazing. And please ask and anyone's listening, if you want to have a conversation, then please do. And Susan, we're great friends, and I look forward to supporting you wherever I can. So yeah, love to.
And vice versa. Remember that. Thank you very much. Until next time, this is Superstar Communicator. Thanks for watching and listening.